The Animal Part 2. A young boy named Adam sat along the shores of the island that was engulfed in a gloomy haze. He was out since dawn, staring, eagerly waiting for a head or a fin to pop out of the sand. A tiny little head rises up, bringing a smile to the little boy's face. It was a little sea turtle struggling to make its way out of the sand. Then more emerged one by one until a whole battalion cropped up from the soft earth, waddling their way into the ocean. Adam paced alongside the turtles, encouraging and assuring the small creatures that no harm will befall upon them. One by one, the ocean swallowed them whole until finally there were none left. A sigh of relief escaped his lungs, and with that, he walked into the depths of the jungle, satisfied with the good deed he has done. His bare feet sank deep within the mud, and his clothes dampened due to the wet leaves. It was normally humid in the jungle mornings, but today especially because of the unusual amounts of thunderstorms. He navigated through the dense trees and cut through the thick underbrush when he spotted a long string of smoke coming from nearby.
I'm almost home.
There was a sudden rustling coming from the towering green trees. Adam looked back and forth, alarmingly to see the culprit of the noise. All he saw were the branches jumbled and meshed in a fashion that resembled a spiderweb. It sounded way too big to be a howler monkey. Before he realized that there was something on top of him, it was pinning him down. The force startled Adam so much that he started to scream and struggle against the creature that was on his back. The creature sniffed and snorted its way from the foot until he reached the outer rim of his ear.
Oh god. Oh god.
Its breath was hot, short, and smelled of rotting flesh, which gave a feeling of uneasiness. A hand gripped firmly on his right shoulder and flipped him on his back, and he could fully see the creature. It was a woman, hair unkempt and greasy from being unwashed. Her skin was tanned, and the face was old, riddled with wrinkles and large bags that drooped from her eyes. She wore a crimson garb that covered every inch of her body. Her bony fingers tilted his head side to side, as a doctor would do in order to determine the illness of a patient. This continued on for a good minute, and then, suddenly, without saying a word, she grabbed him by his tiny wrist and dragged him. He screamed and scratched at the woman's forearm. She did not flinch or wince as the tiny fist hit and continued to trek through the jungle with Adam in tow. Her pace was steadily growing, and soon they were running through the dense foliage.
Mom, Dad, help me!
Tears began streaming down his face, and with the final snap of a thick branch, the sandy white beach came into the clearing. She halted at the sight, eyes fixed at the gloomy haze. Adam balled his fists until his knuckles were white. The old lady turned around, and with that, he threw everything he had behind a single punch. The fist landed hard, right below the eye, and burying itself within the surprisingly hard cheek. He reeled back in pain. It was like punching a block of wood. The woman, however, did not even flinch. She was indifferent to it all, as an elephant would to a mosquito bite. The old lady hoisted him over her shoulder like a primeval warrior carrying a fresh kill. With a sudden sprint, she raced through the sandy beach and into the gloomy fog that covered the immense ocean. The soft, grainy sand kicked up in the boy's eyes, irritating and blinding him. Within a few meters, the soft sound of feet clumping into the sand was replaced with a tiny splashing sound. Adam wiped his eyes vigorously and looked down to see that they were not submerging into the colossal body of water, but were running on top of it.
Let me go!
He continued to squirm as she picked up speed. A roar of the boat puttered through the fog. Following pursuit was a man in the boat, screaming at them furiously.
Help me, please!
He screamed at the top of his lungs. For several miles she ran until they abruptly stopped in the center of the ocean. The air reeked of salt. It was hazy, and neither of them could see a thing. The old lady hunched over, palms stroking the water's surface, and with a sudden thrust, The water shook violently, and a clamor filled the air so loud that Adam cupped his ears tightly. The water continued to thrash around for a full minute, wave after wave, crashing against the bodies foolish enough to brave it, until slowly, it gradually became a calm sea once more. A sound of rocks splitting echoed out in the distance, and they could feel that their bodies were rising. Slowly the fog began to disperse, and the hazy gray sky above was becoming blue with fluffy white clouds that were drawing closer to the pair. A rocky cove came into the clearing, and they both entered the sandy beach. Exhausted, she plopped down Adam on the coast so she couldn't catch her breath. The boy took this as a perfect opportunity and fled as fast as he could. The old woman sat down and let out a huge sigh. Adam continued further into the island, running into the forest like a leaf caught in the wind, breaking each branch that dares interfere with his escape, until he could not bring another step. He was panting so hard, his legs keeled over. All was on his mind was that he had to get away from this crazy lady and find a way home. The forest was dense and lush. Large canopies towered over his head. The earth was soft and cold. Just 3 meters was a large patch of damp grass in the middle of the forest. The blades of grass were 4 feet high. His breath slowly became steady, and soon it was calm. There was a noise, deep within the long grass. It sounded like a low, steady rumble of thunder. It took him a few moments to register that between the blades are dozens of large, tan, slender cats staring at him coldly. Their whiskers twitched. Muzzles were bright red. One of them yawned, revealing a set of large canines. They looked like mountain lions, but smaller. The air was foul from the putrid odor of death and decay. He looked closer and saw that in the middle of the cats was a large carcass of elk, its intestines ripped out, flesh halfway eaten, and his face had a look of dread. "If you don't do anything to annoy them, they won't attack you," a raspy voice called out. He turned around to see the old lady, body stretched out on the tree branch. Adam began to move as slow as a tortoise. His eyes were locked on the old lady. "Look out!" the woman screamed, pointing at the back. Adam quickly turned around in a panic, but saw that nothing was there. "Made you look!" a mutter escaped Adam's voice. "What's that, boy? You got something to say?" responded the old woman. He began to curl up into a ball, head tucked into his knees, and rocked back and forth.
I said I want to go home right now,
he whimpered.
I want my mommy, my daddy. Get away from this place. I want to get away from you.
The woman looked unfazed and smiled. "All right, if you want to go home, I will not stop you. Just go through the forest and past the grasslands and you will find home." She pointed with her thumb towards the long straw-like grass that was beyond the forest.
"But my home is on a different island and there is something in the long grass." "I know," she nodded. "Still, follow my instructions and you will get home. But for the things in the long grass, you gotta figure it out." With a sudden jolt of energy, she leapt high into the air and out of sight, leaving him alone with the beast in the long grass. "Hey! Where are you going?" He shouted and then clamped his mouth in fear, provoking the cats in the grass. They did not move, however. They lay down, lazily licking their paws and grooming each other in contentment. There has to be more than 50 of them in that patch alone. "How am I supposed to cross?" he muttered. He looked around, puzzled at what he could do. Going into the grass is a death sentence. Going around the grass might alarm the cats into attacking, he thought. That is when he looked above and saw the perfect path. Just above the long grass were thick, sturdy branches that connected to the other side of the patch. Perfect! He began to scale along the tree until he could see what was in the field. Just as he suspected, there are 2, 8, 16, 24, 27 cats on the grass. The pack was circling around a large moose carcass, ripping and nibbling the flesh that hung from the body. Adam continued to climb until he reached the first tree branches. Alright.
He sighed, wobbling and teetering along the branch, stretching his arms to balance himself.
For home.
He slowly walks along the branch, knees buckling under his nervousness.
Steady breath.
With each step, the branches bent under his weight. The cats were just below him, eyes tracing even the slightest movement he would make. He carefully placed one foot after another with such a slowness that even a tortoise would outpace him. His feet slipped from the branch and Adam fell towards the long grass. He desperately waved his arms and gripped onto a vine as hard as he could with his right. There was a sudden abrupt halt, followed by a loud snap that made him scream. The pain was intense as his right arm held onto the vine tightly. His shoulder began to swell up and he felt pressure building. With his left arm and lower body, he scrambled up the vine. There was a new pain on his left foot. He looked down to see slash marks stretching from his ankle to the bottom of his foot. Below, a low growl escaped the cat's throat. One of them dug their claws deep in the grass and leapt high into the air. It swiped with its muscular forearm, laying out a roar. Adam retracted his feet enough for the paw to end up swiping thin air. Panting and gasping through the pain, he made it on the high branch. The cat roared in frustration. Adam sat up to examine his shoulder. It was purple and swollen, his arm slumped, dislocated and useless. He was gasping and grunting while shimmying across the branches like a laboring snail. The branch grew wider and denser the closer he got to the tree. Finally, he was at the base. He grasped a slimy vine and pulled himself onto his feet. At the corner of his eye was a small burrow. Instinctively, he held onto the outer edge to steady himself. He felt a small prick on his middle finger and found two tiny bite marks, each no bigger than a grain of rice. A little gray squirrel peeked its head out. It chittered and chirped furiously. At the bottom base of the tree was a pair of eyes, waiting for their next meal, its hind legs bulging. His tail was high in the air. With a sudden leap, the cat latched onto the tree.
I am very sorry.
He dug his hand into the burrow. The squirrel fought vigorously, gnawing at the fingers hard enough to lacerate them. Adam grunted through the pain and threw the little rodent towards the cat. Quickly, the squirrel's body was snared and crushed by the powerful jaws. It squealed and wailed the deeper the canine teeth burrowed. Adam quickly scurried down the large tree and ran into the open field. The grass turned from lush, wavy blades into cracked yellow straws. What was once a murky, wet atmosphere turned dry to the bone and hot. The lush green trees were now behind him. It was nothing but open fields for miles. There was a bountiful variety of species that grazed the plains, ranging from the mighty gray elephant to the lumbering wildebeest. Adam sat down to examine the swollen shoulder of his fingers.
Oh, man.
On top of the large boulder was the old lady, slumping across the body of stone like a lizard, bathing in the hot Serengeti sun. She began to wave ecstatically, arms extending out, her right index finger pointing far into the horizon. This whole situation reminded him of an old tale of a ghost that would show up and abduct children to replace the kids she lost. The children knew it was just a silly tale to frighten them. They even made a game of it. One would be it and capture the rest of the children. But now that this has happened, he wasn't so sure if it was true or not. Albeit, instead of a ghost, it was a crazy old lady. Or, maybe, the hot savannah sun was making him crazy.
This lady.
Adam grunted. She continued to point in a particular direction, and then gave a thumbs up of approval.
As long as she stays there, I should be fine.
Adam said, reassuring himself that he will not make contact with the crazy old lady, but he will go to the direction she was pointing at.
What do I have to lose?
He thought. Adam wasn't so sure which direction home was. The deeper into the grasslands he went, the more lost he felt. There has to be a way to find out where it is. Perhaps if he looked from a high point, he could spot his home island. There is abundance of marula trees, but they could not provide a clear vantage point to see where he was going. On the horizon was a large peak that stood out among the vast grasslands. It stretched high into the sky, where the clouds brushed against it lightly. The perfect vantage point to see where home actually was. The hike was rather mild and tame compared to the rest of the day. No animals harassing him, not even a glance was made in his general direction. To them, he was a ghost just treading along the Serengeti sun. It was high noon when he reached at the base of the mountain. The rocks were rough and the temperature dropped quickly. It wasn't so cold enough to cause discomfort, but enough to notice that it caused slight goosebumps. After scaling the rocky wall for a lengthy period of time, he finally reached the peak and sat on top of the edge. His body was rough and sore. The scratch on his legs was brown and filthy with yellow crusty pus forming around the wound, and the bruise was the size of a golf ball. But even then dazed, the mountaintop presented a unique view. The landscape was divided. One half looked like a redwood forest with dark thunderous clouds raining upon it, while the other was a dry Serengeti. The odd thing was that the rain clouds did not cross over to the savanna and stayed at the forest, like that there was an invisible line that the clouds did not dare cross. Further out were more clouds that cascaded below the island. The glimpse was like something out of a dream.
Beautiful view from up here, ain't it?
It is the same old woman from earlier sitting right beside him. With that, he closed his eyes and drifted off. Thank you guys so much for listening to my content, and be sure to subscribe to me and hit that like button if you want to see more of my content. And yeah, be sure to have a good day and stay cool. Bye bye for now.